Tell me about some of the different things that you're thinking about or having to consider when you're putting together that performance plan for the female basketball players.
Yeah, it's for me, it was trying to learn more so from throughout the time, even in the sense of the menstrual cycles alongside with how they're typically ate. They eat generally almost the same from what I was exposed to. And then now trying to guide as far as like, okay, what other foods do we need to improve on and implement based upon the menstrual cycles as well, to make sure that they're meeting their needs, making sure they're meeting their iron needs, making sure that they're meeting their calcium needs as well, because you see as far as those type of injuries, that's more related to those suitable towards not meeting those needs there. Soft tissue injuries, being anemic. And we had those assessments done, and across the board, you would see that 9 out of my 13, 14 players were anemic or had low vitamin D levels. So trying to address that and making sure that with my female athletes there, ensuring that we're meeting those, not just through supplementation, but exposing them to those type of foods, because they're athletes at the end of the day, and they have the same background as you look in comparison to basically a male athlete, and also a limited time frame of wanting to even have an ability to cook for themselves, no matter what gender that they are. So trying to basically address that and help benefit that by educating them on what we can provide them, and whatever I give them, whatever the team gives them, making sure that, okay, these are some preferences that they had listed in our initial assessments, and then trying to see, okay, until we built their palates to be adjusted to having those more leaner choices and those nutrient dense choices, how can we bring in what they're used to, but in a way where they will choose what we want them to have as well, that's more suitable for their performance and recovery.
Yeah, it's always interesting to have to sort of nudge people towards where you want to get them to and create that environment that makes it just easier to make those sort of choices. And really key to be able to have access to those tests, just like you've done, to be able to show athletes, isn't it, that, hey, your iron levels are low, or B12's low, or various things to really highlight to the athlete, okay, this is why we need to do X, Y, and Z. I'm curious, with those athletes, and obviously plant-based diets are more and more popular. Is that something that was, potentially one of the reasons why you're seeing more anemias there, or what was your experience with some of the plant-based diets at Louisville?
I would say not at Louisville. I would say more so with my track and field athletes.
Gotcha.
With my basketball athletes, I maybe only had maybe one, if that, one or two from each men's and women's team that attempted. Didn't last long because they couldn't remove a lot of the foods that they really loved to transition to that plant-based, or was using it in the incorrect way. And then alongside with that, it was more so my track and field athletes at Ole Miss were more leaning towards that plant-based diet. And also I have some athletes here on the football end that's leaning towards more so of a plant-based diet. And then it's trying to make sure that we define it in a way of, now we're using it as plant-based, or are you trying to lean towards vegetarian and vegan as well? Because some of them, they're using it in the incorrect way.
Yeah, that's getting back to that idea of, why are athletes engaging in this diet? I mean, it's the question around, is the athlete going plant-based, let's say vegan, to be able to increase performance, to improve health? They're trying to understand where the athlete's at. So, from your frame of reference, how do you start to engage in those conversations? Because we know that athletes are people. And so if my, girlfriend, best friend, somebody around me goes plant-based vegan, then all of a sudden tells me it's great, hey, I might try it as well. And of course, we want all athletes to eat lots of plants. But with that sort of conversation, if you start seeing some of those anemias or B12s, how do you start to address that or interact with your athlete who's deciding to go down that path?
Yep, it's also about my presence. Like, they have to trust me too at the end of the day, and make sure that I'm there and available and know who I am. So even from the short times of me even being at the locations I was for maybe 1 year to 2 years, it's hard to build relationships when you're there for a short amount of time, but sure, I'm someone that can build relationships fast. So that was my benefit in there. So I would say it's just more so being with them while they're during the times that they're eating, trying to just shooting the stuff with them, just ensuring, outside of just even nutrition, building a relationship, a personal relationship with that too. And then seeing, okay, what are some things they're doing? Because they'll tell you once they trust you that what they're attempting, what they've heard from their coaches, what they've heard from their friends, from other athletes or other institutions, or what they heard from a recent documentary or from something that they've read online. They will tell you those things as long as they trust you as well. And then they see that you're not just going to basically just shoot down anything they have to say, but you're able to have that conversation with them and they can take from that conversation as well. So for me, the conversation, it was very easy sitting down with them to see, okay, what they're doing first. And then when it came time to be able to address those needs, basically say, okay, look, I have your assessments, I have your lab values. Now, because you're doing this right here, and what I've been noticing you doing, this is something we got to take in consideration and we need to address to make sure that you're performing well and that you're able to recover at your best too.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, isn't it? I mean, anybody, whether it's an athlete or a client, doesn't want to feel like they're being judged. So when you sit down and eat together, if you're the dietitian, sport dietitian, nutritionist, whatever, if you're just getting to know someone and you don't have a relationship, that's a natural sort of inclination, isn't it? To sort of think that, okay, this person's sitting down to kind of check out what I'm eating here. And so, yeah, it's so important to be able to build that relationship. And again, a lot of practitioners listening in who are probably just jumping in with different teams or groups. And, on the one hand, it can kind of seem obvious on how to build relationships, but on the other hand, it's still not that easy, right? It's something that has to come. So what are some techniques, or what are some strategies, or what are the things that maybe you naturally do that help you to build some of those relationships?
So I'm just myself when I first walk in. So I'm very goofy at the end of the day. So I have a great way of just basically just whatever that they're discussing, seeing what they're talking about. It may be something from a movie, it may be something as far as just from everyday life. I can be like, it's still professional line, but I can be someone like an uncle coach.
There you go.
So to where,
humor is great, right? Humor always helps.
Exactly. Sure. Exactly. So to kind of just break those things down there, or even if it's in the sense of, if we're making a competition where it comes to basically, okay, we have these points that are accrued from making the right habits, from meeting their goal needs as far as from their weights as well, to make sure to see if they're consuming what they need to hydration wise, depending on how many bottles that they consume, all that stuff. So just making it a little game in that sense and building that relationship there. Like, see, I could have told you could have got these points for your team there, but now you're slacking and you're behind. Team is behind because you didn't do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So just like little things like that, because they like competition, like they like games like that. And that's a kudos to our staff, our performance staff, and trying to make it fun in that way. And then the other way, as far as for me, it's just, again, being personable. Sometimes it's not just even talking about nutrition or whatsoever. It may be talking about what they're doing academic wise. Being a student athlete, from my experiences, was troubling them, seeing like what's going on. And this is still staying within my boundaries of not stepping outside of my lane when it comes to basically the social cues and the social aspects that the mental performance or those individuals that deal with that. Not stepping on our toes there and staying within that lane.
There's always those intersections. And so, I mean, it's good for everyone to be able to appreciate and understand. And it's always interesting to me that even if you want to get 1 or 2 points across to an athlete, how if you can spend most of the time talking about the things they're talking about, or life, or family, or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden when you mention those 1 or 2 things, it's like and you have that relationship, and they take it on board much easier than, oftentimes you want to just jump right in and say, you got to eat more of this because you got to get your iron levels up, or you need more of that because of B12. And if you don't have that relationship, then at first it can again feel, even at these levels where, to your point, the athletes are there to perform, it's not always so straightforward. And on that point with women's performance, whether it's scenario, condition, or if we go the other side, maybe supplementation that was different with the women's teams, female athletes versus some of the men that you've been working with.
Yeah. So with my women's team, after we did our assessments, it was more so I tried to, as much as possible with them, whenever we did their menu developments and whenever we had anything as far as like on the road or games, as far as like trying to gauge what we need to have, their food based on the travel schedule and all that stuff. It was more so I made sure that when I had their supplement kits ready, basically, because I control when they got their supplements, how they got their supplements, all that. So to make sure the compliance was there.
Yeah.
Because my women's teams were smaller, especially basketball, and I could afford to do so. And when I traveled with them, it was more so long as I had more vitamin C, iron, B12, and then along with their vitamin D2. So as compared to my men's, with them, I'm supplementing more with magnesium, and this is because of football, more contact. Magnesium, fish oil. I have those conversations with them about creatine on their own because we can't give that to them. I've had those same conversations with my female athletes too for the benefits as well, especially for my basketball players, for my hoopers, because that's basically what they're using as an energy sources alongside with that, replenishing those needs, especially for that long season that they have and those many games, 2-3 games in a week. And alongside, you got to take into consideration the travel schedule. So women athletes, it was again, iron, vitamin C, B12, vitamin D, conversations with creatine. My men's, fish oil, magnesium, fish oil, magnesium, conversation on creatine, vitamin D. And then for some reason with them, it was more so I had to do more with their hydration needs as compared to my women athletes.
Okay.
And from observation, when I attended both practices, it just seemed that my men, they have a lot more in their sweat rate as compared to my women athletes. And that's just, again, from my observation. My women's, they were a lot better on their hydration practices than my men were. Taking consideration.
Compliance a little better.
Exact compliance was better.